Labour are continuing their campaign to regain power with only one policy, being nasty to Jeremy Corbyn in public. Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy continued that trend in an interview with the Murdoch-owned Times Radio this weekend.
Can you envisage a situation where maybe he then would stand as an independent in Islington North? And do you think he'd lose? He'd lose to the Labour Party?
Oh, Paul, I've got no idea, absolutely no idea what he intends to do.
I know, but what if he did? Well, the party would win, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, look, we stand in seats, we stand to win, and we fight them very hard, and we would do that, and I would go and knock on those doors for our candidate and do what I could to support them. But I would just say this to you as well, is that Luciana Berger, who I know you know well, and was a very good friend of mine through our years in Parliament, said when the EHRC report was published, this is no longer about Jeremy Corbyn. He's tried to make it all about himself, and this is about the Jewish community, the hurt that has been caused to them, and the trust that needs to be repaired. And that's what I care about. That's what I'm focused on. And it was heartening to spend time at an event in Manchester with hundreds of members of the Jewish community just this week, and to hear how slowly and painstakingly we are starting to rebuild that level of trust. And that's what I'm focused on, not the individuals who've caused so much pain over recent years.
Ash, I want your take on this. Can you imagine Lisa Nandy canvassing the residents of Islington North to boot out Jeremy Corbyn?
Can I just say something about Lisa Nandy's comments about the hurt caused to the Jewish community and how seriously she's taking it? If she was taking anti-Semitism and racism seriously, she would not be on Tom Newton-Dunn's show. She wouldn't be on there for even a second. And the reason why is that man, when he was political editor for The Sun, he published an article which was this mad conspiracy theory map, which had all these different little fact files, and you could click on them. And it supposedly exposed a hard left network surrounding Jeremy Corbyn. I was named in it. Many people, you might have been named in it yourself. I can't remember, Michael. And when you clicked on those fact files, you can see who was cited to put this map together. And one of the sources was Aryan Unity, literally a neo-Nazi organization. There's another one called the Millennium Report, which is notoriously anti-Semitic. And it also seems that this map, this mad conspiracy network map, was actually lifted from, far right bits of the internet, from something which was called the Traitors Map. So this is something which I think had the real risk of perhaps inciting violence, inspiring what's called stochastic violence, where you create an environment which makes political violence more likely, and also was steeped in and drenched in far-right conspiracy theory and anti-Semitism. So if Lisa Nandy cared at all about these issues, which she's supposedly taking so seriously, she would go, I refuse to be on a show being interviewed by this man on issues to do with anti-Semitism and racism, because you know what? The hypocrisy would be staggering. So I have a real problem with the way in which Labour MPs, supposed progressives, supposed anti-racists, normalise this man who has never been held accountable for what was published under his name. So that's the first thing that I would like to say. The second thing is about this question of, Jeremy Corbyn and the way in which Keir Starmer's leadership and also members of the shadow cabinet have sought that to define their own political identity against Jeremy Corbyn. So, one, it's stupid. Absolutely nobody in the electorate is won over by simply making a negative case by going, here's what I'm not. We've seen that time and time again, which is voters outside of very specific circumstances, like perhaps with Trump, they actually don't like that. They're like, can you just tell me what you're going to do rather than what you're not going to do? The second thing is that for all of the attacks leveled at Jeremy Corbyn and for all the ways in which his personal approval ratings suffered because of those attacks, in 2017, 40% of the electorate, and in 2019, 32% of the electorate still went out and voted for him. So when you go out and you say, Jeremy Corbyn has caused so much pain, he's essentially second only, to botulism in terms of, poison and evil. The thing that you're doing is you're essentially saying to that 40% and then that 32%, and so are you. you are associated with this person. If you liked this man's policies, if you liked what he stood for, if you respected his integrity and his principle, that means you're also trash, right? So you're kind of insulting a large portion of your potential voters. And then the third thing is, whether or not Labour could win in Islington North if Jeremy Corbyn contested the seat. Obviously, people tend to vote more so based on party and who it is that they want to be prime minister. Polling has borne that out. However, you do have these isolated cases where the appeal of a particular politician, who they are, what they stand for, and their name recognition is able to upset that general political trend. Now, that's exactly what happened with Ken Livingstone, who had to run as an independent for the London mayoralty and won and beat the Blair selected candidate, Frank Dobson, I believe it was. Ken Livingstone was, the victim of a procedural stitch up in order to try and keep him away from the London mayoralty. And he won because he was offering something which Londoners liked, and his name had a significant amount more recognition than Frank Dobson's. When it comes to Islington North, what plays in Jeremy's favour, should he decide to run as an independent candidate, I also wouldn't blame the guy if he just, fucking wanted a break from the daily smears and lies and, hysteria of presenting him as, the greatest evil this country has ever seen since Coronation Chicken. I couldn't blame him if he wanted a break. But the things that run in his favor is that, one, regardless of whether or not you agree with him politically or you like what he stands for, he is a famously dedicated constituency MP. There are so many people in Islington North who have stories about, when their council flat was in a state and Jeremy Corbyn said, I'm going to make sure this gets sorted for you. Stuff to do with immigration status, stuff to do with attempted deportations. Jeremy has been, really dedicated and committed to his constituents. And then the second thing is name recognition. Islington North is a safe Labour seat, sure, but also when he was excluded from the Labour Party, there were these vox pops being done, and somebody said, this is Jeremy Corbyn country. And it's because what he was offering in terms of his economic vision, his social vision, the fact that he wanted to achieve a more just economic settlement without throwing minorities under the bus, it made him really popular in Islington North. So I would be wary of hubris in this case. And I also think that to run against Jeremy Corbyn in Islington North in, an aggressive and hostile way and all that entails, I think that it would hold back the Starmer leadership and Labour's chances more generally. It will just look really unattractive. The most sensible thing that the Starmer leadership can do is go, okay, this man is an MP. He was elected as a Labour MP and he is a Labour Party member. That means he's a fucking Labour MP, and just get over it. Just take the L and move on. But instead, they're in this impossible position of at once having no leg to stand on about why this man shouldn't be a Labour MP. It's nowhere in the rule book. There's absolutely nothing, that says that this man shouldn't be a Labour MP. But so, holding to essentially defying their own guidelines and their own laws and internal structures, but also saying we define ourselves against this man. We draw all of our political identity from not being him. These are it's a contradictory position to be in, and it's a stupid one. It's a rod they've made for their own back. So yeah, Lisa, what are you doing on Tom Newton-Dunn's show? Like, do you actually care about racism and anti-Semitism at all? Or is it just a cheap political line?
Well, she cares about it when people in the Murdoch press have decided that someone is a racist. They've decided Jeremy Corbyn is a racist. She'll lean into that. If the racist is actually within the Murdoch press, she wants to keep her hands clean. She doesn't want to upset those people. Lisa Nandy, of course, doesn't just speak for herself. She sits on Keir Starmer's front bench and so is subject to collective responsibility. Labour supporters have responded to her comments on Times Radio by therefore resharing some of the statements Starmer made during his leadership election about the then outgoing party leader.
Well, look, the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn in that election we've just had were terrible. And they came back at us on the doors. They vilified him, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew why they were doing it.
That was Keir Starmer when he was courting the votes of Labour members. He said the media vilified Corbyn and that they knew what they were doing and they knew why they were doing it. Yet when Corbyn said the same thing after the release of the EHRC report, he was suspended. And now Keir Starmer has his shadow cabinet ministers saying they'll campaign on the doorstep of Islington North to boot the guy out of Parliament. There is more, though. This was part of Keir Starmer's acceptance speech.
I want to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn, who led our party through some really difficult times, who energised our movement, and who's a friend as well as a colleague.
That video there, where Keir Starmer calls Corbyn a friend, shows that he isn't just a liar, he's a snake. Ash, it's plain to see how duplicitous Keir Starmer has shown himself to be. Will he get away with it?
No, I don't think he will. And I would think that the reason why this will go badly for him actually has very little to do with Jeremy Corbyn and how people feel about him as a former party leader. It's got much more to do with what it says about Keir Starmer. Because as you said, saying 1 minute he's a friend and a colleague, I pay tribute to him. He's led our party through really difficult times. He's been attacked, he's been traduced, he's been smeared. And then to turn around and go, no, wait, actually, all of those attacks and smears were completely correct. I never even liked that bitch. Everyone can see that for what it is, which is naked opportunism. One of the things that the electorate really responds to is a politician who is who they are. Do you know what I mean? They just are who they are. That's it. Boris Johnson, you know who he is. He's someone who'll say anything to get elected. He's made that clear. He's kind of funny sometimes, and he'll get Brexit done, and he did. All right? He's both slippery and lacks integrity, but he's never promised to be anything else. You know what you get. With Jeremy Corbyn, his strength was his weakness and vice versa, which is there was no changing who he was. He couldn't really be, super agile and responsive to the moment, but that's also what made him an appealing conviction politician. Whereas Keir Starmer's ended up with no policy, no vision. He says he's a man of conviction and integrity, but he'll also turn on someone who he said was his friend, merely a year ago. What do you end up with? It's absolutely nothing. And I think that, you can see the desperation in the Starmer project at the moment, which is despite the government having handled this pandemic in a completely catastrophic way, in a way which has cost hundreds of thousands of lives in this country, despite there being rampant runaway inequalities, despite people being enmeshed in a housing crisis, despite there being climate change happening now, extreme weather events, and completely inadequate responses from this government, Keir Starmer has failed to make a dent in this government's polling. And he only has one idea. That's punch left, and it's not working. And the more it doesn't work, the more he punches left, because you've got Mandelson and that whole gang of, ancient Blairites around him dripping poison into the ear, saying, well, if you just do this a little bit more, it will definitely work. No, it won't work. What it will do is get the Labour Party in a shape which is more conducive to someone from the right of the party winning the leadership. They'll do this by disempowering the membership, by presiding over prescriptions and expulsions. And that's what they hope will happen, is that they'll end up with, Blair 2.0 to rule over the ashes of the Labour Party and not win any elections, right? That's all they want. And Keir Starmer is either, I think, too blinkered or perhaps too unstrategic as a politician to see that for what it is.
I mean, what do people know about Keir Starmer other than that he doesn't like Jeremy Corbyn? I mean, and even that, his one selling point to the public, I don't like Jeremy Corbyn, falls apart because just 2 years ago he was saying he was a brilliant colleague and a friend. And he can say, oh, things have changed since now and then. Things have changed because he made a statement after the EHRC report which changed everything. And I mean, that just doesn't wash. Even the people who think that Jeremy Corbyn mishandled the anti-Semitism crisis, none of them think that his comments after the HRC report were worse than what came before. Yet for Keir Starmer, that was the dividing line. The dividing line was before he said, oh, actually, the media did exaggerate the extent of the problem. That was when he suddenly became persona non grata. He suddenly became someone we should be actively campaigning against on the doorstep. Before that, he was a friend who he wanted to be prime minister. Doesn't make any sense. Because also what Jeremy Corbyn said after that EHRC report wasn't anything new. It was what Jeremy Corbyn had been saying the entire time that Keir Starmer was in his shadow cabinet campaigning for him to become Prime Minister, which was to say, yes, there is a problem, but also it was exaggerated. That wasn't new. No one heard that statement from Jeremy Corbyn. It's like, oh, I didn't realise he believed that. No, we knew he believed that, right? He said it consistently throughout the whole period. Now, some people might say, oh, that was a bit unstrategic. Maybe you should have used a different tone. Fine, whatever. The point is, nothing changed between 2019, when Keir Starmer was trying to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, and 2021, when Keir Starmer is saying he's trash on the bottom of my shoe, and I wish he would have nothing to do with me. I want to deselect him as an MP. I want to stand someone else against him. It doesn't stack up. You can't have your only selling point as I'm a man with integrity and I hate Jeremy Corbyn, when just 2 years ago you said I'm a man of integrity and I think Jeremy Corbyn's the bee's knees. It doesn't stack up. It doesn't make sense.